I never thought a single dinner could change my life forever. One moment, Simon and I were engaged, planning our wedding, discussing venues and color schemes. The next moment, I was staring at him, heart pounding, realizing that everything I thought was true was a lie. Betrayal doesn't come with warning signs. It creeps up on you, like a shadow you can't quite place until it's too late. You never expect the glass to shatter. And yet, here I was, watching everything I had worked for splinter in front of me. But maybe, looking back, there had been cracks. Maybe I had chosen not to see them. It had all begun in the worst place possible, the hospital, where my father lay unconscious, machines beeping steadily around him. The antiseptic smell clung to everything, making it hard to breathe, to think. I remember pacing the halls, my throat tight, when Simon appeared. His calm demeanor, the way his green eyes locked onto mine with quiet reassurance, it felt like a lifeline. He was the doctor everyone trusted, steady under pressure. The white coat suited him, like it was made just for him, and the way he held my father's chart made me think he held the answers to everything. "It's going to be all right," he had said, his voice so calm it almost made me believe it. I stopped pacing, my anxiety a breath away from breaking loose. I turned to him, searching his face for something solid to cling to. "How can you be sure?" Simon gave me a smile that softened his sharp features. "Because your father is strong. And so are you." His words pierced through the fog of fear I had been drowning in. We talked more after that, small conversations during his rounds, longer ones in the cafeteria. Over time, I let him into my life, into the deepest parts of myself. I shared my dreams, my insecurities, my messy relationship with my sister Aura. I had no idea then how deeply that would come back to haunt me. Our engagement wasn't a whirlwind. It wasn't flashy, but it was perfect, or so I thought. 6 months after we started dating, Simon knelt down in my apartment, holding a ring. His eyes were soft, his voice steady. "I can't imagine my life without you, Rose. Will you marry me?" I didn't hesitate. I said yes, and we celebrated in the quiet glow of that evening. For weeks, I floated on air, convinced I had found my forever. But then there was Aura. Aura had always been larger than life. She glided into rooms like she owned the place, with her perfect hair and perfectly calculated smirk. My older sister was beautiful, successful, and unapologetically cruel. For as long as I could remember, I had lived in her shadow, trying not to get scorched by the heat of her ambition. When I told her about Simon, her reaction was immediate. She rolled her eyes, her lip curling in that familiar, cutting smirk. "A doctor, Rose? Really? Could you be any more predictable?" "It's not about his job," I insisted, hating the way her words made me feel small. "I love him." "Love," she repeated, as though the word was a joke. "Sure. Just don't be surprised when he gets bored. Doctors. They have options, Rose. And from what I hear, you're not exactly keeping him on his toes." I swallowed the insult, refusing to rise to her bait. Aura thrived on competition, and I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. But her words burrowed under my skin, needling at me in moments of quiet. Weeks passed, but Aura's taunts grew sharper. At every family gathering, every dinner, she would find a way to insert herself between Simon and me, casting her wicked little hooks. I noticed the way her eyes lingered on him, the way her touch on his arm was a little too familiar. One night, after a family dinner, I confronted her. The words burst out of me before I could stop them. "Why are you doing this, Aura?" My voice shook, but I didn't care anymore. I was done pretending she wasn't trying to sabotage me. "What's your problem?" She barely looked at me, her cool eyes flicking over my face like I was an annoyance. "My problem? Please, Rose. I'm just having fun. Flirting with my fiancé is your idea of fun?" I shot back, my anger rising like a flame. Aura smiled, slow and cruel. "Oh, sweetie. It's not my fault if men find me irresistible. Maybe you should work on being a little less dull." I should have seen the signs. But I didn't. I pushed them aside, clinging to the belief that Simon loved me, that our relationship was solid. Until that night. We were at our favorite Italian restaurant, sitting in the soft glow of candlelight. But Simon's smile was thin, his laughter hollow. He hadn't touched his food. Something's wrong. The thought gnawed at me all night. Finally, he set his fork down and looked at me, his expression heavy with something I couldn't name. "Rose," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." My heart skittered in my chest. "What's wrong?" He took my hand, but the warmth I once felt wasn't there. "I can't go through with the wedding." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "What are you talking about?" I managed to choke out, my throat suddenly dry. Simon looked away, his face etched with guilt. "I'm in love with someone else." The world tilted beneath me. "Who?" My voice was barely a whisper, but I already knew the answer. "It's Aura." The air left my lungs. My sister. My own flesh and blood. I yanked my hand out of his grasp, feeling cold, empty. "You're in love with my sister?" The words tasted like poison. Simon's eyes met mine, filled with regret. I never meant for it to happen. But it had happened. And everything I had built, everything I had believed in, shattered around me. I stood, pushing my chair back so fast it nearly toppled over. My heart was pounding, my vision blurry with tears I refused to shed. "I hope she was worth it," I spat, my voice shaking with rage and betrayal. And then I walked away, leaving behind the man who had promised me forever, and the sister who had taken it all. 5 years had passed since that devastating night. Time dulls the sharp edges of pain, but some wounds never fully heal. After my broken engagement, I threw myself into work, drowning out thoughts of Simon and Aura by focusing on my career as a graphic designer. But the betrayal left a scar, one that never fully faded. No matter how far I moved forward, memories of them lingered, like shadows creeping in at the corners of my mind. But life has a way of moving on, even when you're not ready. The years blurred together until I met Leo, a client in need of a branding design for his startup. There was no grand romance at first. He was different from Simon's polished, put-together perfection. Leo was grounded, warm, with a quiet charm that slowly drew me in. As we spent more time working together, something shifted. The walls I'd built started to crumble, and before I knew it, Leo had filled the void Simon had left behind. Now, 2 years into our marriage, I was happier than I ever thought possible. Leo wasn't perfect, but he was perfect for me. He made me feel whole again, showing me that love didn't have to be conditional or built on lies. We were at the grocery store that Saturday afternoon, doing our usual weekend ritual of picking up ingredients for dinner. Leo loved to cook, and our evenings spent preparing elaborate meals together had become a kind of therapy. I stood by the vegetables, distracted by the mundane task of choosing peppers, when a voice slithered through the air like poison. Well, if it isn't little Rose." My entire body tensed, fingers gripping the card handle. I didn't need to turn around to recognize the smug tone that had haunted my past. Slowly, I turned, and there she was. Aura. Still radiant, still calculating, with Simon standing awkwardly beside her. The sight of them together made my stomach lurch. Simon had aged, his once confident posture slouched. He looked tired, almost hollow. I swallowed the flood of emotions threatening to surge. "Aura," I said, forcing an icy calm into my voice. She smiled, that same condescending smirk I remembered all too well. "Still shopping for dinner?" "Some things never change, I guess." "Neither do you, apparently," I replied, not missing a beat. Before Aura could fire back, Leo appeared, his presence steadying me like an anchor in stormy waters. He slid an arm around my waist, his lips brushing my cheek. "Hey, sweetheart. Found everything we need?" Aura's eyes flickered toward Leo, taking him in with a look that lingered a second too long. "And who's this?" "This is Leo," I said, straightening up slightly, "my husband." Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. "Your husband? Well, isn't that something?" Her gaze narrowed, searching for something to undermine, a flaw to expose. Leo extended a hand to Simon, who shook it with an awkward, reluctant grip. "Nice to meet you," Leo said with a warm smile. "And you are?" Simon cleared his throat, his eyes darting anywhere but mine. "I'm Simon." A thick silence hung between us. Simon shifted, clearly uncomfortable, while Aura radiated her usual superiority. She loved having the upper hand, but this time, I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. Leo turned to Simon with an easy smile. "I've heard a bit about the past, but it sounds like Rose and I have come a long way since then." Aura's smile sharpened. "Oh, I'm sure you've heard some interesting things." Leo remained unflappable. "What matters is the present, not the past." I saw the flash of frustration in Aura's eyes. She wasn't used to people resisting her games, and Leo wasn't about to be one of her pawns. She turned her attention back to me, her voice laced with faux sweetness. "So, Rose, how's married life treating you? I always knew you'd find someone eventually. Though I must admit, I didn't expect someone like him." Leo squeezed my waist gently, sensing the barb in her words. "Actually, Aura," he said calmly, "I'm the lucky one. Rose is incredible, strong, talented, more beautiful than you could ever imagine." Aura's smirk faltered again, the mask slipping. Simon, on the other hand, looked like he wanted to vanish. There was a distance between them, something strained that I hadn't noticed before. The spark that once pulled him from me seemed long gone. They were no longer the perfect couple they once pretended to be. "Well, isn't that lovely?" Aura said, her voice dripping with venom. "But marriage can be tricky, you know. People aren't always who they appear to be." Leo didn't even blink. "That's true. But Rose has been nothing but honest with me from the start. That's why I married her. I'm not one for illusions." Aura's eyes darkened. Simon finally spoke up, his voice hesitant. "We should go, Aura. We have somewhere to be." She shot him a sharp look but didn't argue. As they turned to leave, Aura glanced back at me one last time. "Good luck, Rose. You'll need it." I watched them walk away, feeling a strange mix of triumph and unease. Seeing Simon again, seeing how much had changed, how much had broken, left a hollow feeling in my chest. The past wasn't fully buried, but I wasn't living in its ruins anymore. I had Leo. I had moved on. Leo turned to me, his expression soft. "You okay?" I nodded, though a lump rose in my throat. "Yeah. It's just harder than I expected." He pulled me into his arms, holding me close. "You're stronger than they'll ever know. And I'm not going anywhere." As we finished our shopping and headed home, the warmth of our life together wrapped around me like a safety net. But I couldn't shake the look on Simon's face, the silent discomfort, the tension with Aura. Something was wrong between them. And though I didn't wish them well, I couldn't help but wonder what their lives had become. Still, as we pulled into the driveway of our cozy home, I realized it didn't matter. I had everything I needed right here. The past could stay where it belonged, behind me. Yet, deep down, I knew the story with Aura and Simon wasn't over. And when their fall came, I would be ready. The encounter with Aura and Simon clung to me like a shadow. I convinced myself I had moved on, but Simon's hollow stare and Aura's rattled arrogance stirred something old, something unresolved. They both appeared cracked, their once perfect facade showing signs of collapse. I should have felt satisfaction, even a sense of justice. But instead, unease lingered. Something about that run-in felt unfinished. 2 weeks passed, yet I couldn't shake it. Leo and I had slipped into our comfortable evening routine. He was chopping vegetables, and I sat at the kitchen table, half-heartedly scrolling through design ideas. But my mind kept circling back to that day. Simon's eyes. Aura's smirk. What was it that felt so wrong? Leo, ever intuitive, set down his knife. "You've been distracted, Rose. Still thinking about them?" I sighed, knowing I couldn't brush it off any longer. "It's not them, exactly. It's just Something feels off. Simon looked broken. Leo. I've never seen him like that. Leo walked over, leaning against the counter, concern in his eyes. Maybe he's finally realizing what he lost. Or maybe Aura isn't who he thought she was. I wanted to dismiss it, but instead, I reached for his hand. Maybe. But it feels like something bigger. Like it's not over yet. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected. It was late, too late for visitors. Leo shot me a puzzled look before heading to the door. I stayed frozen, my gut twisting with an odd sense of foreboding. Then I heard a voice, one that sent a cold shiver down my spine. Leo. Is Rose here? I need to talk to her. Simon. Leo glanced back at me, his brow furrowed. Rose? My heart raced as I walked to the door, unsure of what I'd find. And there he stood, a far cry from the polished man I once loved. His hair disheveled, face gaunt, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in days. What are you doing here, Simon? My voice was cold, harder than I expected. He shifted awkwardly, glancing at Leo before locking eyes with me. I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I didn't know where else to go. I need your help. I blinked, incredulous. My help? After everything you did? It's Aura, he croaked, the words almost strangled. She's gone. I flinched. Of all the things he could have said, I hadn't expected that. Gone? What do you mean, gone? She left me, he said, voice trembling. Took everything, the money, the house. She cleaned me out. I'm ruined, Rose. His words hung in the air, surreal and absurd. For a moment, I could only stare at him. Aura had left him? It shouldn't have surprised me, after all, she was nothing if not ruthless. But here he was, the man who had shattered my life, standing on my doorstep, begging for help. Leo stepped beside me, his presence a solid wall of calm. Why come to Rose? His voice was measured, but the steel in it was unmistakable. You didn't think twice about her when you walked away. What makes you think she owes you anything now? Simon ran a hand through his hair, his face crumpling. I know I don't deserve it. I was an idiot. But Aura. She's not who I thought she was. I snorted. Shocking. Simon flinched at the bitterness in my voice, but desperation kept him going. Please, Rose. I'm at the end of my rope. I don't know what to do. I have nothing left. I studied him for a long moment, memories flashing through my mind. The Simon I had loved, the Simon who had betrayed me. Now he was just broken. But pity wasn't enough. What do you expect me to do, Simon? My voice was quieter now, but firm. I can't save you. You made your choice. You left me for her. He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off, shaking my head. I'm sorry you're going through this, but I've moved on. I have a life now, a good life. And you need to figure out how to rebuild yours. For a moment, I thought he might break down, but instead, he just nodded, shoulders sagging with defeat. You're right, he mumbled. I shouldn't have come. He turned and walked back into the night, his steps slow, defeated. I watched him go, feeling an unexpected weight lift from my chest. Leo gently closed the door, wrapping an arm around me. You okay? I nodded, surprising myself. Yeah. I think I am. The past was finally behind me. Simon's reckoning had come, and whatever was left of him was no longer my burden. If you like this story, please subscribe, like, click the bell, and leave a comment. Thank you in advance.